Welcome, Spark. So what kind of Spark are you? Player? Creator? Or both? The stories yet to be told. The games to be made. Civilizations and societies to be formed. The universe is waiting for you to bring it to life. Now, how do we begin?
And we're live.
Woo. Hey community, how's it going?
Hey guys, so we are here for an education stream, one that we've been prepping for a while. I have a cheat sheet here, so I'm going to be looking down while running through it. Just
Hold
to
them up so they can see. Everything's so low, you can't see.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's good. They won't see I have this sheet like right in my hand as they're going through it. Because today we are going to be diving into brains. We are going to be talking through a lot of stuff related to brains. We're going to ramp up, so we'll start with the simpler stuff and then get more and more complex layering on top of each other. So what we're going to cover in this tutorial, we're going to cover activate and deactivate brain. We're going to cover pages, including switch page and call page. We're going to cover how to call a page from other objects. We're going to cover how to save brains correctly so they're in your brain gallery, how to add brains and what add brain means, how to push and pop brains and what those mean. And then lastly, we are going to tackle probably the most complex thing that people have not really explored too much, but it's great, is channels and slots in brains. So that's a lot.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this stream. Some like this stuff is, I think a lot of people stay away from it and don't dive in just because it's confusing, and there's not a lot of material out there that does use it for worlds, but like getting a handle on these things are gonna like just help your creation so much.
Yeah, this is once you understand just what you can do with brains, it opens up and allows for so much more flexibility with your game. It's just, yeah, you should hopefully learn a lot from here. For our more core community, it's probably going to start out a bit simpler and then ramp up to more complicated. For our newer users, it's going to start out with things that you'll be able to grasp and then ramping up to things that hopefully you'll still be able to grasp. Yeah. So let's jump into it and let's just actually talk about what a brain is. So a brain is more than just a container for code. It's a system for how code is organized and run. And so a single object in the world can have multiple brains. Those brains can each have multiple pages, and each page can then have multiple lines of code. And then so that's kind of how code works within brains. And then all brains work within an object. So that's the most important thing to think about, is an object is what uses brains, and you can have up to 100 brains running at a time in an object. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to go over the simpler activate and deactivate brain. So we have our little guy right here. Let's jump into test mode. And we have our guy right here. We have the sign that just says this is a sign. And what we want to do is when he interacts with the sign, we want him to stop moving. So you kind of deactivate him and he doesn't do anything else. So let's go ahead and do that with deactivate brain. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just simply within this sign right here, I'm just going to add on, oh no, I'm covering up my keyboard. Hold on, wait, moving all this, okay. So the first thing we're gonna do is we are going to say when interacted, do deactivate brain.
You did interactable.
Oops, I'll change that. When interacted, do deactivate brain it. So what that means is whatever interacts with this thing is going to deactivate that brain. So let's jump into test mode again. Let's run up to this little guy. And when I press B, then I'm moving the controller and nothing is happening because his brain is deactivated. Nothing is running in this guy's brain anymore. So we want to make it so that actually you can get control back of your brain after, reacting to something. So let's change this sign again, and instead let's do when interacted. Then we're going to call an object variable. We're going to call target equals it, and then we are going to say deactivate brain target. And then we're also going to make a Boolean true we're going to call this Boolean read. So do read equals true. Then we're going to bring this Boolean here. And actually, this say tile, I'm going to bring this under this Boolean now. So it only says that one thing there. So when read is true, it's going to say this is a sign. And then after, we're going to do started to count down. Oh, right. That's on the win side. Started to countdown timer of, let's just say, 2.5 seconds. So after 2.5 seconds, then we are going to, let's take this again. We're going to go ahead and activate brain of the target. And then we are going to go ahead and make read equal to false. So now what this is doing is it's setting that the thing that interacts with this guy is the target. It deactivates the brain of that target, makes this Boolean true. Then after 2.5 seconds, it activates the brain of that target again. So let's go in here and test. So we go up here. We got that B button saying to interact. So we interact. I can't move right now. And then 2.5 seconds later, I get control back of my character. So that's what that does. It will allow you to kind of toggle between your player unable to move. Basically, its brain has been totally deactivated. That's what deactivate and activate brain means. It means a specific brain. In this case, it's actually calling just the overarching brain of this object. It's being activated and deactivated.
Gotcha. And you can actually do, so the activate, deactivate, you can actually do that in the properties, right? This would be showing it how to do it through code, but like prior, you could go in and actually set it.
You can. So like you could, for instance, all right, you go into the properties of something. You go to properties, brain is active. You can turn that to true or false. You also have another way in code to look for brain is active and set that to true or false instead of activate and deactivate brain. So yeah, there are a few ways to do it. So now let's go into pages. And keep an eye on chat, and people in chat who are watching this live, let us know if you have any questions as we're going through, if we're going too fast, if there are concepts you're not fully understanding, that would be great. So on page number 2, we are going to simply add in here depth of field. That's all we're going to add here. And now we are going to use some page switching to call that. So page switching, so when read is true, there's a lot of things you can do with page switching. Let's go over to this brain area. So you have switch page and call page. The difference between these two is switch page goes to another page in a brain and only runs all the code on that one page. So it switches from one page to another page. Call page basically will call all of the code on the page that you're referencing and run all of that kind of on that line right there. So run all of that code right there on, say, line 6, goes through all the code on the other page, and then it continues on down line 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. And if it continues, then you'll continually call that page every single frame. So it'll continue to call that page and run all of the stuff happening on that page. So we're going to go ahead and do call page for this, because what I want to do is I want to have a depth of field happen when I'm interacting with the sign. So how to call pages. You can call a page a few different ways. You have an option of calling, and this also applies to switching pages. So you can do next page and previous page, and that just goes kind of forward one page, backwards one page. So if I call page next page, it's going to call this page right here. I can also choose to call page and then say page 2, and that looks for the page numbered in this object. So page number 2 is this page. You'll see at the very top where it says page 2 of 3, so that's page number 2. The best way, especially as you get more and more complex, the best way by far is you want to name all of your pages. So let's go into the options menu. Let's choose to rename page, and we are going to call this at depth. So now this page is called at depth, and now what we can do is do call page and find the text for at depth. And now this specifically calls that one page that has been named depth. It's just an easier way to kind of organize code that way. That way also if you're kind of adding more pages onto something, you don't have to keep track of the page number changing or anything like that.
And me and you both do the @ symbol in front of our
yeah,
page
the @
text.
and
Yeah.
I do the @ symbol just so it goes at the very front of your text variables, so it's easier to find. All right, so now what will happen is when read is activated, it's also going to be calling this page that just runs this depth of field. What that looks like, we interact right here, and then you'll see kind of the depth of field happen off on the side while you're not active. So you can also use call page on different objects. So what we're going to go ahead and do here, so we have this logic cube right here. On its first page, we have nothing running. On its second page, we have a depth of field with a far blur and a near blur and a focal depth set. So we can actually call this, this page from this brain into this other brain and run it. And how that looks like is we want to do call page. Then you want to give the name of the page. So in that logic cube, I called it main page. So we're going to call page main page. Then you go to modifiers, and you'll have this from modifier right here. So you can say from what object. So we go here, go to object, in-world picker, and choose this logic cube. So now this is calling that one page from that logic cube, which is it's the second page on the logic cube, so it's not going to be running automatically. And so that allows us to also go up here, hit this, and we got like a big depth of field happening. So just like that, we can now kind of call pages from any object, reference any page from any object at any time. So really, any brain in your world can interact with any other brain, call pages from that brain, call code, call anything from all the other brains happening at the same time. All right, now that we've gotten past all that, let's go ahead and go on to
the save brain.
Yeah, the save brain. Okay, so saving brains is a really important part of doing some cool things in Project Spark. What we're going to do is we're going to bring this empty logic cube here. We're going to put in this empty logic cube basically we want to have a kind of flame attack effect on an enemy. So let's put in this logic cube really simple lines of code. When duration timer 4, so this means for 4 seconds, then it's going to play an effect. We're going to play the flame aura effect. And then also every 0.15 seconds, and we're going to loop this, then it's going to damage whoever this is on by 2 points. So the really important thing about brains is how you can save them into the gallery and then reference them. So this brain right here, what we're going to do is before saving a brain, you want to make sure you name the brain. So we're going to call this firepower. Also, it's always nice to name all the pages you're working with. So I'm going to call this page Fiery Goodness. And now I'm going to go ahead and save this brain. And then you can add a description to that brain. You can change a take a screenshot, however you want. And then you go ahead and save. And now that it has saved that brain into your brain gallery. So I don't need to use I don't need to have this brain in my world anymore. I will need to keep it if I keep on adding to it, and then I have to kind of save it. But this brain's done. I've done all the tweaking I need to for this brain. So I can delete it, and now I can still reference this brain because it's saved in my brain gallery. So what I want to do now is I want to put a goblin in here. And on that goblin, then I am going to, let's bring a goblin in. I'm going to just put this right here. And I'm not going to actually add anything to this goblin's brain. The only thing I need to add is I want basically this guy to have kind of punches of fire. So every time he punches the goblin lights on fire. And the only thing I actually need to do for that is go into my main character's brain. I think I got rid of an attack. Yeah. So let's give him an attack. So when X is pressed, do attack. And now I can reference when attack hit. So my attack has hit somebody, and specifically it has hit my enemy. Then we are going to say it. So the thing that was hit is going to go ahead and add a brain. We go to Objects, Gallery Picker, and then we go over to Firepower. So when my attack hits an enemy, that enemy adds the brain Firepower. And I haven't done anything to my goblin because I don't need to. So let's go ahead, let's punch him, and you see he's on fire. He gets damaged for about 4 seconds. And now he's good, so I punch him again, and then bam, he's dead. So just like that, I kind of have created that quick fire attack that allowed me to kind of add that brain and then kill the goblin with it. So let's just make this brain inactive for this goblin. Now we want to go ahead and play around with push and pop brain. So I have this warrior right here. He has a totally blank brain. I want him to start as a statue. When you interact with him, he starts following you around. In order to do that, then we're going to do some brain pushing. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to start him out as a statue. So we're going to do once, then his team is going to be equal to 1, just so he's kind of on my team. His pace is going to be equal to 0. And this kind of helps make him a statue. And then we are going to set his solid color is equal to, let's set it to gray. Oops. Gray. Okay. So he's going to be this solid gray mass. And then I just want to highlight the fact of what we're doing. I'm going to highlight him, and I'm going to highlight him gray as well. So right now, just go into the world, and this guy is a statue. He's a gray statue with a gray outline. So now what I want to add on to him is when he is interacted with, then his pace will be set back to 1, so he's no longer a statue. We're going to just set his color, so his primary color is going to be brown. We're going to set a secondary color of, let's say, yellow. And then we're going to set a tertiary color of, let's say, white. And then I add one last thing here. So when he's interacted with, go over here, brain, push brain, then we are going to push a brain from the brain gallery. And we're going to push a brain on him that we are calling follower edited. And that's something I changed here. And I'm just going to show you what the difference between follower edited is in a second. But let's just go in here. So let's go up to him. You can see I can interact with him. As soon as I interact with him, he's got this follower brain pushed onto him. So it's your usual follower brain. I've just really changed one line of code in there that I'll show you soon. So now he follows you around. So push brain basically kind of pushes down the current brain he's running, so he no longer runs it, and adds that new brain on top of it. Pop brain does the opposite. Pop brain removes the current brain he's running, and if there was a brain he was running previously, it might run that brain. If there's no brain he was running previously, he won't run any brain. So let's let me just show you what I did with this follower edited brain. So let's bring this follower edited brain in. So this is your usual follower brain. The only thing I did in here is line 3. When interacted, do pop brain. So let's just kind of run you through that again. So when interacted, do, go to brain here, pop brain. And so this removes the current brain that character is running. So I pushed his initial brain. His initial brain was this, where he started out as a statue, and then when he was interacted with, he turned to this nice color, and then had this brain push that one time. The only thing I really have that would continue to run in this brain is the fact that it's highlighted gray. And so that's kind of the really important part that I just kept in there. So when his brain is sort of not running, when this brain is currently running, he'll be highlighted gray. When this brain is running, he will not be highlighted gray. And actually, I think I have in here a code to highlight. Yeah, so let's just remove that. Okay. So he's highlighted gray, as you can see, just like before. I hit B. He's now my follower. And now I have the option to interact with him again. And when I interact, it's going to pop his brain. So what does that do? I hit B. And so his follower brain is gone. He's highlighted gray again. If I were to instead have right here, instead of push brain follower edited, I'm just going to do a pop brain. Run that. Then he's highlighted. I hit B. He's no longer highlighted, and he has no brain running in him. So pop brain works in sort of, imagine your brains are all stacked. And every time you push a new brain in, it adds that brain on top of that stack. Everything below that stack is no longer running. When you pop a brain, it takes the top brain from that stack, and if there are other ones underneath of it, they're pushed back up. So if you keep on popping all those brains, it'll push the next one up. And then eventually, when you're out of brains, it'll just push up kind of a blank brain. So he will have no brain running. And that's kind of how, that's the basis of how push and pop brain work. All right, are people still following?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, because now we're gonna get to the hard stuff. Now we're gonna get to actual multi-brain stuff. So this is where we go to channels and slots.
This is when it gets good.
Yeah. So I actually want to kind of share with like multi-brain, just the idea of adding multi-brain itself is just the simple idea of adding multiple brains running at the same time to an object. It was actually something that we didn't have in Project Spark for a while, early on in beta when we were developing it. And Eric and others from our team decided that, well, we need to have multi-brain in order for nice things to happen. And I actually have the kind of initial GDD, game design document, that's what we call
really?
design documents of sort of like why multi-brain needed to happen. And I think the definition initially given when pitching the idea of multi-brain in Project Spark kind of helps frame this. So if you can't have multiple brains running in an object, the design team wanted to add basically when someone is hurt, then they're given this poison effect. So if like you hit somebody, they're poisoned, so they slowly drain health. Without multi-brain, basically you had 3 ways to have that poison work. One, you could push that poison brain just like we saw. The problem with that is it removes all the current stuff they're running and only runs kind of I'm being poisoned. 2, you could have a Boolean happen within that object or other kind of variable logic. When it's turned on, then the poison effect runs. The problem is in there, you have to basically, in every single object, you have to put in there this like poison Boolean.
Mm-hmm.
Or 3, you add an invisible object into your scene which managed the poison effect. And the problem with that is the object had to communicate with all targets. The code to implement that is difficult, and the approach is kind of expensive in terms of performance. So the team came up with you need to be able to run multiple brains so that we can just simply add this brain of this poison effect on top of what's currently running. And that's what you guys saw with the fire effect on the goblin. The goblin was still doing everything that it normally would, just on top of it, it was also being burnt by fire. And so that's kind of the basics of why multi-brains need to work. So let's talk about channels and slots. And I kind of came up with this little thing right here to help explain it. All right, so you have your default character right here. He has a default brain, which is right here. And this brain is in what we call the default brain channel. And the slot is a kind of default slot number 1. Going back to the example of this goblin, when we added the ability to have fire kind of happen on top of the goblin, we added a brain onto the goblin. So that brain, when we added it, was basically added to this default channel in this character. So it'd be something like this, sort of like they're stacked on top of each other. And you can continue to add brains into a character, and they'll continue to be added to this default channel within a character. So every character has that initial default channel. What Project Spark gives you is the ability to make your own channels in brains. So say you make a channel called the movement channel. This would be a whole new kind of column, basically, of brains running. So we have you have a movement channel, so you have like jump as one brain, you have like move as another brain, you have dodge as another brain, and you say like fall damage as another brain. So you have kind of 4 brains within there, and they're all in 4 different slots in that channel. You can add multiple channels, so you could add like an attack channel where you have like basic attack, heavy attack, ranged attack, and I can't think of another good one. And so the idea, think of kind of a channel as a new column of stuff that you can interact with within your brain. The hierarchy goes prop. So prop is the largest thing because a prop can have 100 brains running at a time. 100 brain limit is your maximum limit. So no matter what configuration, once a prop is running 100 brains, it can't run anything else. So you have your prop as the highest element, and that's this guy right here. After that, your next element is a channel. And so these are what these columns are. You can have any number of channels in an object. Again, you have to worry about the fact that you can have 100 brains running at a time in an object. After channel goes slots, and that's what each of these rows are. Each of these rows is a slot in that channel. And the important thing is you can have as many slots as you want in the channel, but a slot can only have 1 brain running at a time. So that's why it's kind of perfect that this slot only has 1 object in it, because you can only have 1 brain running at a time in a slot. And so that is the kind of important concept for what we're going to build on our character right here. So I'm just going to remove kind of all this character's interactions. So removing his attack, removing his movement, removing his jump. So kind of all he's left with is his camera and his health. Because we are going to split that up into multiple brains. So we are going to have a move brain. And I'm just going to simply say, when in this brain, it'll be just simply when left stick, do move. It's the only thing I'm putting in this brain. We're going to have a basic attack brain. So we're going to say when X is pressed, then he does attack. Let's just change this brain to attack. And don't worry, we're going to be going over channels right now in much more detail. Given the concept of channels is sometimes hard to grasp, seeing it in action is where you start to really understand how awesome channels can be. So then we're going to have, let's see, we have move, we have attack, then we're going to have jump. So we're going to have a jump brain, and actually I'm going to have kind of 2 different jump brains here. So when A is pressed, then he jumps. I'm also going to add in here when page entered. Then we're going to say that his multi-jump count, basically how many times he can jump, is equal to 1. So he can only jump 1 time. And we're also going to highlight this guy gray, just so you can kind of tell this brain is running right here. Then we're going to add a jump tier 2. So this will be kind of his super jump. So when page entered, we're going to up his multi-jump count to 3, meaning he can jump 3 times in a row. He's going to be highlighted green. And then also I'm going to say jump 2.5, which basically that says he now jumps at, every time he jumps 2.5 meters high. Okay. So we have 4 different logic cubes, each with a single mechanic in it. So how do we get all that into our character? We're going to use channels and slots to really segment this in a way where it's just so nice and controlled that for those kind of control freaks and the people who love things to be just all in their perfect boxes and all slotted away, you will really like this. So we're going to go ahead and do add brain. I'm going to just choose we'll start with move. And now we're going to do a modifier, and we're going to say to channel. So channels can be given a name or a number. You can use numbers or names to define channels. We are going to call this channel, we're going to call it movement. Slots can also be given names or numbers. I prefer all my slots to have numbers. It just is much easier to track that way. But you can also use names if you want to. You're basically kind of creating the references to all this stuff. So now I have added the brain move to channel movement to slot number 1. Just to kind of help show you the difference, if I just said add brain move, it would still add it to my brain. Here I'm just creating this channel. I'm just saying like, hey, you're creating a new channel here. Create this new column of stuff. Let's go over to this column. So create this new column of stuff and create this one brain in that column right there. It's basically just saying create that so you can reference that. But both of these lines of code will do the exact same thing. And to show that, so this is just my movement, so I'm going to ignore that line. We're going to test. So I can move around, and this is the version that's adding things to channels and slots. Or I just use add brain, and then I can also move around because it's adding it to my default channel and a slot in that default channel. Okay, so now along with that, we are going to go ahead and add the brain jump also to the movement channel. And we are going to say slot number 2 in that channel. And then we're going to go ahead and add brain attack to a new channel that we're going to call combat. And we're going to say slot number 1. By the way, if you don't give slot numbers to these, it's automatically going to give every brain added in that channel a slot number. The problem is you can't reference them. So when you're adding, if you're going ahead and using channels, just make sure to use slots also, so that way you can reference a specific slot, because I'm going to show you how you can really use that to your advantage. I'm just going to add in my like Fireball Y ranged attack here too. So we'll just do, when Y press, do shoot. So we're going to add in a 4th brain here. We're going to copy that. So add brain, we need to change that from attack to shoot. To channel combat, to slot number 2. So let's just change this from attack to shoot. All right. So, go into test. Now I can move around. I can press A to jump. I can press X to punch. I can press Y to shoot. So right now, it's basically... Oh, right. I forgot to make all these brains templates. Important to do that, especially if you have movement stuff in brains, because those brains are also going to be moving and firing stuff. So just very important kind of brains you're referencing. Make them templates for now. Okay. And this guy is, he's kind of weirding me out, so I'm going to remove this guy. All right, so basically I have all of my same mechanics that I had in my normal player. I can jump, I can punch, I can shoot, and I can move. And so the only real difference is I have added them in a way where I can reference each of those individual channels and slots. And the way that this can be really useful is I have this sign right here. This sign is actually, right now, it's just a carbon copy of this sign, which deactivated my brain, then said something, and then reactivated my brain. This is just a carbon copy of that. The only difference is it says something different. So in this sign right here, what I can do is I can say, so this sign still kind of references the target. So I can say target. Let's go over to brain. So we're going to go to Multibrain here. So target, add brain. Then we'll go to in-world picker, and we're going to choose jump tier 2. 2 slot. To channel. 2 channel, I believe I just called it movement. Yeah. And to slot number 2. So let's go back to my guy right here. You'll see right now his kind of tier 1 jump is also being added to channel movement to slot number 2. And this is adding tier 2 jump to channel movement to slot number 2. As I said previously, a slot can only have one brain running at a time. What this means is this brain replaces the other brain. So if I had just said add brain, jump tier 2, I would have both those brains running. I don't want both those brains running. And I just want an easy way to kind of add a brain and to forget the other brain that's in that slot. And this is the easiest way to do that. So let's just go back. So there we go. So now I interact with the sign, and it adds this jump tier 2 brain onto my player. So let's see that in action. So I go over to the sign. It's actually over here. And I hit B. It says, you have super jump. And now I'm highlighted green. I can jump so much higher. I can jump 3 times. So think about channels and slots. Like if you're working on a RPG or just any game where you have upgrades, channels and slots are so useful in helping you segment parts or mechanics of your characters and kind of adding new things on top of each other. It's also really useful if you want to deactivate parts of a person's brain but keep the other parts running. So we're going to go over to this red sign right here. I want to stop my character from being able to punch. Maybe I have gone into a town and you don't want your character just, a friendly town, you don't want your character to punch the villagers in a friendly town. You want to just remove their attacks from that town. So what I've done is I've added both attack and shoot to this combat channel and to different slots. So the first thing I want to do is I want to just remove, basically I want to stop my combat channel because my combat channel is stuff that hurts people. And let's bring this, let's just bring her right here. And let's just say she's our villager. Oops. And then I think I think she's neutral. Okay. So this sign is also kind of a carbon copy of the other sign where it just says something different and then it reactivates your brain. So what I want to add in here is I want to say my target, so the person who interacts with me, which would be the main player basically, they are going to go ahead and deactivate brain, channel. We're going to pull combat. This right here deactivates their entire combat channel. So I go in here. So right now I can punch and I can shoot. And so like you imagine walking around a village and then you can go up to a villager and punch them. That's not too nice. So maybe you want to make it so that in your world you can't really punch or shoot while you're in a village. So just interact with the sign. It says no attack for you. Now I'm hitting A, or hitting X, nothing's happening. Hitting Y, nothing's happening. So now I go up to this villager and I can no longer kind of hit them or punch them or do anything. You can even, for instance, kind of add on top of that, maybe when you're in a village, X is sort of your talk with somebody, and when you're outside of the village, X is your attack. So just like that, I've deactivated that part of the brain, but I can still jump. I can still go over here, talk with this part of the brain, and get super jump. And now I can kind of have super jump, but I still can't. Oh, I can punch. Punch has been added again. Well, I can just deactivate that again right here. Interesting. I'll have to look into that. So you can have kind of all these brains starting to run independent of each other. And so the other thing you can do is you can go more specific, and you can say that target, deactivate channel combat, and slot number 1. And that just deactivates my punch. So maybe I still want to be able to shoot in my world. So I go over here. So I can punch right now, and I can shoot. So let's go ahead and remove my punching. Go over here. It says no attack for you. So go over to her. I'm pressing X. Nothing's happening. But I hit Y, and I can still attack her. So it's just kind of deactivating part of my brain. So like you could also find this to be really useful if, like, say for instance, all right, let's instead deactivate my movement channel, slot number 1, and I believe that's my move. Yeah, that's just regular move. So kind of on the fly, you can have different parts of your channels deactivated. So let's go over to the sign again. Let's hit B, interact with it, and now I can't move. I can move my camera around, can't move my character around, but I can punch, and I can shoot. So you could have, say you're making a Conquer game, you want to have kind of him not be able to move when he's on a context-sensitive button, say, for instance, like a shooting gallery, then you could deactivate that specific channel and slot and make them not able to move, but still able to do everything else. So like really, channels and slots allow you to segment everything into areas where you can call them independent of one another. The nice thing is, so you have kind of all these brains here. I can actually go ahead and save these brains. So let's save this, let's just save, say, move. So we're going to save that. We can delete that. We're going to go ahead and save jump tier 2. So we're saving jump tier 2. We are saving jump 1. I'll just keep these in there for now. And the nice thing is you can add brains specifically from your brain gallery. So we're going to add move here. And I believe jump was what was added in slot number 2. So you don't actually have to have any of those brains in your game. You can just have them in the brain gallery. So it doesn't take a bunch of objects, and you can kind of reference them whenever you need to in different ways. And then we go over here, and this guy right here used to reference an in-world object. Now it adds a brain from the brain gallery, which is jump tier 2. So just like that, I've now kind of removed a bunch of objects from here. And I can now kind of go around and still get my super jump ability. And I recommend only saving your brains once you have gone ahead and actually kind of tweaked it to the full. That'll make it super useful.
Mm-hmm. So you've played around a little bit more around with this than me. Do you have like a good suggestion of how to like keep track of which channels you're using and like where the slots are at? Because there's not like UI in place, right? As we have like a brain with a slot, like pages and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you could like, for instance. I mean, I try to do my channels in what makes sense. So whenever I'm setting up my characters, I actually do split up all of their mechanics into different brains. It just makes it a lot easier. It may sound more complicated, the fact that every mechanic is in its own little brain, but that makes every mechanic compartmentalized, and it makes it like so much easier to just work around with that mechanic. So what I'll do is I will have a movement channel, and that's just sort of my default, like every sort of movement. Then I'll have a combat channel, and that's every sort of combat. And then I will have a like a special abilities channel, and that's every special ability you might gain throughout the game. So you can display channels and slots, sort of like when a brain is being called or when a channel is activated, you can display that channel, display that slot. But I would just say, you know, from the outset, just similar with any sort of variables, naming them in an architecture that makes sense to you and that it's easy for anyone to understand. So like your movement channel would be really confusing if you called it the do channel, because like what does do mean?
Gotcha. Okay, so basically just use really clear names and then just keep it organized. Yeah. And
I recommend for anyone who hasn't tried out Multibrains, and anyone who's listened to this, watched this, and thinks that it might make your game more complex than it needs to be, I would just recommend try in one of your games, just any one of your games, take every mechanic or every sort of input in your main character, split those up into each one give its own logic cube, and then bring them all together using channels and slots, and just see how that works. Because once everything is in your character, so once all of this stuff goes into your character, you know, once you've kind of brought all these brains into this slot and all these brains into that slot, they all work still off of the same variables. They reference, so all the same variables are referenced across all your brains. So if, you know, for instance, previously you had one mechanic that needed glide to be true for another mechanic to activate, once you bring them all in with Multibrains, it'll still all of those variables will still play with each other, and they'll still kind of be one and the same, because what you're basically doing is you're taking all this stuff and putting it into your player. So it's like putting it into the object and presenting it as all of these things running are one brain basically, but they actually happen to be multi-brains. And that's probably the most confusing thing, is you're taking, with multi-brains, the most confusing thing to understand is you're taking multiple brains, putting them together, and then repackaging it and saying like, this is my one brain. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And channels and slots. Are channels and slots global? Move to. I don't think they can be global.
I think it's strictly to the object.
Yeah, it's so think about a channel and a slot are specific to that object. You won't need to reference. like there's no sense to have a global channel global object because you can't have multiple objects sort of running that brain at the same time. You'd have to more duplicate it. So global doesn't really fit with channels and slots because you're kind of putting them all together like that.
Because in the end, code runs in an object, so you can't have like a code that runs outside of an object.
Yeah. Well, we have 3 minutes left. I can talk about sort of what I'm using it to build right now. So I'm working on a 3D platformer with like that's a mix between an action adventure and 3D platformer. And so what I have in my main character is I have a nice acceleration deceleration movement brain. So I have that in its own little brain area. So he kind of accelerates nicely and decelerates nicely when he's moving. I then have a kind of multi-jump approach. So like I hit A to jump or A to double jump, and then I also can hit left trigger to do like a super jump. And then I have, when I hit X, I'm on the ground, I hit with a sword. When I hit X when I'm in the air, I slam down on the ground. So like I have all of these things kind of happening at the same time in this character. And I've just found that using Multibrain, having kind of all these channels and slots together has made it so that he runs very well because he has a lot of, he ends up having about 200 lines of code in him running at once. And because I'm using Multibrain, he runs really efficiently, and he has like no hiccup between switching from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Like the way I think of it, like a good use for like channels and like slots and stuff would be like, let's say you have a channel and it's directly tied to your character's like level, and then you can increment your slot. And so when you're on level 2 in that, you know, you go up to the next slot in that channel.
Yeah.
You could do that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then it would like basically in that package there'd be like your level 2 behavior versus like your level 3 behavior. Or like maybe that's just for your like level display, like so that would set the new max of your meter that you're displaying that shows like how much experience you need to get to the next level. You know, that's like what would be constant for level 2 or something.
Yeah, that's actually a really great way to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing to end on is to talk about. So I think most people who have been around Project Spark for a while enough are very familiar with AdBrain and how to use AdBrain. And I think I've seen a lot of people use AdBrain in their worlds. And I just want to like further emphasize why channels can be really nice, because when you're using AdBrain, so you have your guy right here, you have his default brain right here. Every time you use AdBrain, it's just adding them all to this same column right here. So you end up having like a very large stack of brains that kind of continue on, you know, forever, or well, I guess up to 100. So if instead you were to take those brains and segment them out into basically different columns, different channels, different rows, then it makes it much easier. It makes it easier to manage in the long run. So like say you take this movement brain right here, you move it to the movement slot. You have like a special abilities channel, so you move it up here to like slot number 1, special abilities, and you can kind of like start to segment all that out. The goal when using Multibrain is your player's default channel, what we'll call quote unquote channel 0. The best thing to do is to get that down so that he only has kind of his surface brain right here. So you always have that one default brain where even if, let's get to my character again. All right, even if, let's just remove all this stuff. Even if the only thing that's running in this person is just they're adding brains to channels, they still technically have this default brain in his default slot. Mm-hmm. But the best way to get it down to is so you only have that one default brain there in that slot, and then this default brain is the thing that packages up all of these. And yes, you can actually make it so like you have like he adds another brain which like uses another set of channels and slots and whatever, and you can make it super complex if you want. But easiest way to do it is just have kind of one default brain, and then a bunch of channels and slots, and it packages those up for people.
Yeah. And this is not even a terrible way to actually organize it in your level. Like, actually have these columns if you want to, with, like, little groups or whatever.
Yeah, I actually, when I'm working, actually, on Multibrain, this is how I segment my stuff.
Yeah, and, like, color them maybe a certain way.
Yeah.
For you know, for a channel. Like, that's not a bad way of doing it.
Yeah, and then, but at the end, once you're done, only do this at the very end. When you're done tweaking everything, save all these brains into your brain gallery, and then reference them from the brain gallery so you're not using up extra objects in your world for those logic cubes, it runs very efficiently if you're actually referencing something directly from the brain gallery. So, yeah, that's Multibrain in a nutshell. We didn't get to Get Brain and Sense Brain because I haven't found a good tutorial that fully explains that. Zach put together something, and I went through it and I was like, well, it still doesn't make full sense. So I'm thinking of like what's the way those make sense. But there's like one extra layer we didn't get to, which is Get Brain and Sensed Brain.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, can't you like push and pop brains in channels and they'll do different things too, right?
That doesn't work too well, pushing and popping channels. It's push brain and pop brain are not multi-brain. So push brain and pop brain don't really understand what multi-brain is. So those will, like, you'll say,
start doing weird stuff.
If you say like push this brain from this channel, then it'll be like, oh, you want to push everything? You want to push everything? No, they're from the channel. Oh, I just push everything. Is that okay? So that's kind of how push and pop brain work with multi-brain. So they don't really
probably better to do like add remove more often than not.
Yes, okay. Exactly.
Or activate deactivate.
Yeah, do add remove or activate deactivate. Basically, when you're working with multi-brains, stick to the multi-brain folder. Don't use push brain and pop brain because they don't understand multi-brains. These two guys were around before multi-brains were included, so they were like, what's this multi-brain thing? Nice. I don't understand.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And can't you, this is just me asking questions, if you like take a brain and assign it on a slot that a brain already exists, that replaces that brain?
Yes. So right? that's what I did here. I had my default like tier 1 jumping right here in this movement channel, slot number 2. And then in here, I said when this was activated, then it also adds jump tier 2 to channel movement slot number 2, which is the same as that. Therefore, it punts that previous brain out and adds this one in. But if you want to get the other brain back, don't use pop brain because again, pop brain is like, oh, you want me to remove everything?
Yeah. So now if you took that and remove it, is it smart enough to remember it? Will it slide the other one back into slot 2, or do you have to specifically add that back?
I'm actually not 100% sure. I think you do need to add the other one back in.
Because that's like the nice thing about push and pop is it remembers the old one.
I would just use like adding on top of each other because it'll always take away the other one and add the other one on top. So adding a brain just kind of swaps in the new one on top of that.
Okay, it basically replaces it anyway.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Does add brain add a new brain channel? Okay. So again, let me quickly go through. When you just use add brain, you don't specify a channel, you don't specify a slot. This is what happens. You have a default channel. So you have this default channel that your initial brain is in. And those brains will just all be added to that default channel. So they continue as every brain you add to continues to be added to that default channel. Right there. Just like that. So that's what add brain does. If you're not specifying slots and channels, then it's, even if you're specifying slots, it'll always add to that default channel unless and until you start specifying a new channel, it's always going to add to that one right there. So yeah, I think that does it.
Yep. I think so. And then just the other thing, so no matter the amount of channels, slots, or whatever that you have going on, it's 100 brains. That's all you get per object.
You can have a lot more than 100 pages though in a brain. So
yeah, that's what Miss God said. He had one that has 16,000.
Yeah, so I mean, there's theoretically like it's really hard to get to a limit of how many lines of code you can have running in an object because you can have up to 100 brains, but you can have like as many pages as you want in that brain, and then you can have in that page, I forget, it's like 128 or 256 or 512 lines of code.
I think they said it's up to 1,000.
Okay, 1,000. Right.
Although performance won't be.
Yeah. So like you can have 1,000 lines of code running on a page. You can have as many pages as you want, up to 100 brains. Problem is, if once you get up to that many lines of code running, things will start to run kind of like garbage. So just
trying to edit it.
Yeah, edit it down to as few lines of code as you want to. Like if once you get up to the thousands of lines of code in just one object running, it starts to get hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This guy's making sure we have the facts right.
Yeah. Yeah, runtime will run fine if you have like a page with 500 lines of code. It's really when you get up to the thousands, like once you get over 1,000 lines of code all running simultaneously, that's where things can really start to bog down. It does get up pretty high though. So yeah, I think that'll about do it. We're also going to put together a written tutorial version of this where you can kind of mull it over. We're going to have this up on YouTube for everyone who just watched on YouTube. We'll be like, well, it's already up here. Mm-hmm. And I think that'll do it. Ask questions to us about Multibrain. Did it make sense to you? Have we convinced you to try and use it? Because I think once you get into the swing of it, it really is, I don't know, it really helps you segment stuff and makes you feel like a pro. Like when you do a good line of code, you feel like such a pro. You're like, oh man, I'm so smart.
Yeah. So we'll have to, I'm already thinking about like a future tutorial now where we'll be able to take this and kind of apply it to something more see it in action or whatever. Maybe I think my text tree conversations might be able to use Multibrain pretty good use. So I don't know, I'm going to see how I can incorporate that and do a live stream. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
But
cool. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you on Thursday for another awesome stream that we will reveal when we get closer to Thursday.
Right?
Yeah.
Only 2 days.
Yeah, exactly.
So, alrighty. I think that's it.
Yep. That's
Alrighty.
it. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Create your game as you play? Any Spark can do it. Spark, activate the portals.